So here we are today again, still talking about gun violence. And we'll not stop talking until something is done, and we hope you will not stop either. Rick Hogan, noted Chicago journalist and author, said about How Long Will I Cry? I guarantee that after you read this book, the next murder that screams across the headlines and television news will affect you more deeply than ever before. We know that the stories we present today and the others that you'll read in the book afterwards will sadden, appall, and anger you. We ask that you not only feel this anger, but that you act on it. When you entered today, you were given a program, and in that program there was a blank index card. As you listen to these stories and our speakers, we ask that you think what message you would like to give to our legislators about gun violence. Please then write your message on the index card. At the end of our event, we'll collect all the index cards and we'll compile the statements into one document, which we will then send to our legislators, letting them know that these are the demands of their fellow citizens and constituents. Now, please join me in welcoming Miles Harvey of DePaul University to start our program.
Hi everyone, thanks so much for coming out today. So, we just had a weekend in Chicago where we had more murders, more shootings, tied to more warm weather. This book started with a similar kind of event. In 2009, there was a terrible incident which a lot of people in this room know a lot about, the murder of a young man named DERRION Albert in Roseland on the south side. He was beaten to death with lumber, stomped to death with boots, and all the while someone videoed it and laughing while they videoed it and put it on YouTube. And when it went on YouTube, this caused a national sensation. And for me as a North Sider, it was really a wake-up call. I thought, you know, how could this happen in my city? We live in the most segregated city in the United States, and I think sometimes we just get used to living in little bubbles. And this was one of those moments that, for me, broke that bubble. But I still didn't quite know what to do about it. I'm a writer, until I spoke with my friend Hallie Gordon, who runs Steppenwolf Youth, and she had this idea for a documentary theater piece. In other words, we would go out, or someone would go out and record people's real stories and arrange them into a theater piece. And she said, yeah, but Miles, I don't really have the people to do that. I teach creative writing at DePaul University. I said, I think I might have the people to do that. So for 2 years, my students and I, while 900 people were getting murdered in Chicago, went around and interviewed people who were directly affected by the killings on our streets. We talked to policemen. We talked to a lot of kids, both in gangs, some of them on the edges of gangs, some of them trying to stay out of gangs. We talked to emergency room nurses. We talked to funeral home directors. We talked to the county coroner. And we talked to a lot of families of the victims. So we're going to hear two of those stories tonight. Before we even got the theater piece halfway done, we realized we had way more powerful stories than you could ever fit on stage. And so by the time How Long Will I Cry, Voices of Youth Violence went on stage last year at Steppenwolf Theater, we were already planning a book of oral histories. And that's what we're going to read from tonight. So I thought I want to introduce a couple of actors. First, well, we'll just start with one of them. I'd like to introduce KONA BURKS, who is currently in Saturday Night, Sunday Morning at Steppenwolf. Her many prior credits include Florence and Wine in the Wilderness, in which she received a Black Excellence Award for Outstanding Actress in Theater in October of 2013. She will be reading Pamela Montgomery-Bosley's story. Thank you.
My greatest wish is to get my baby back. When I go visit my son in the cemetery, I say to God, I won't tell nobody, just give Terrell back to me. And I know God can do this. I'm lacking in a lot of other ways, but I believe he can do it. My faith is that strong. I know he can do it, but he won't. Even so, I still have Terrell's stuff down in my basement like I'm waiting for him to come back. My husband and I are waiting for him to come and ring the doorbell. We wait for him to call. This is something that you cannot accept as a parent. No mother or father should have to bury their child. I grew up in K-Town on Kedvale Street in North Lawndale on the west side. Violence wasn't what it is now. We had people on the west side just hanging out. Everybody liked to stay outside and enjoy the weather. I would ride my bike to downtown. We walked to school and feel safe. My son Terrell grew up in the Rosemore neighborhood, which is right next to Roseland on the far south side. My husband Tom grew up in that area, which is why we purchased a home there in 1991. It was okay when we first moved there, and then as the years progressed, it started changing. Once the city started tearing down public housing projects in the 1990s, people started renting out our homes to different individuals, and that changed our neighborhood. We didn't hear guns on my block till later years. Now I can be in my house and hear pow, 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 and everyone just walks around desensitized. Terrell had freedom to a certain degree, but not a lot. My boys now, I have a 17-year-old, and I don't even want him to walk around the corner. I drive him around the corner. I know that I'm sheltering him too much. He even says that he feels like he's living in a bubble. It's overbearing for him and his brothers. I'm not letting them grow up. I'm not letting them feel like teenagers. But that's my biggest fear, to lose another child. If I lose another child, I would probably lose my mind. People seem to think that I'm doing good, but I'm not. I'm horrible. I can put on my front face the majority of the time, but my heart is broken, it's torn apart. To this day, I don't understand why God allowed me to be in this situation, because I was an excellent mom. My goal was to protect Terrell as much as possible from the gangs, the drugs. I didn't want him to be connected to nothing negative in the neighborhood. When Terrell met friends, I made sure I met their mother and father. That was something that he said parents don't do anymore, but I did it. I wanted to know whose house he was going to and a little bit about their families. Is the father living in the home? I just needed to know some information. And then I monitored his friends. They would bring their book bags in the house and leave them lying around at times. I would peek in their book bags to make sure that their bags were okay, because I needed to know who my children were around. Terrell had always been an advanced student. He started speaking and walking earlier than a lot of children, and he skipped a year ahead in grammar school. He was outgoing, outspoken, had to get the last word in. At school, his principals and teachers used to tell them he was a leader and to remain positive because other young people followed after him. He started playing the bass guitar in his freshman year. The bass was his passion. He played for a lot of gospel artists. He played for a quartet group called the Victory Travelers. He actually got the chance to play on the main stage at the Gospel Fest with the Victory Travelers and some great choirs. Terrell was doing everything that I always wanted to do. I mean, I sang too, and I was in the choir, but Terrell was making it and accomplishing everything in the gospel music world that I wanted to do. So I enjoyed supporting him and cheering him on from the audience. I was known in the music world as Terrell's mom. It was just awesome to see him on stage playing. His goal was to travel around the world and play the gospel music with a 6-string bass guitar. But this did not happen. My husband and I taught Terrell right from wrong, just like any parents who love their children. I'd stay up and watch him come home just to make sure his eyes were clear. If I smelled cigarettes, I would say, "You know what we studied about lungs." I grab his lung picture and show him everything. So my husband and I stayed on him, building up to be the great young man that he was. The day before everything happened, I had cooked a pot roast and meatloaf. I had made the pot roast for that Monday night and meatloaf for that Tuesday. So that Monday night, he was talking to his girlfriend on the phone, and he was like, "You gotta come over here. My mom, she threw down. She cooked some pot roast today." The next day was the meatloaf day when I came home from work, and the meatloaf was eaten off. I called him to ask, "Why did you eat the meatloaf before I got home?" The moment I left the message was probably when everything was happening because he didn't pick up his phone. At 6 o'clock that evening, Terrell took his girlfriend to church for a praise dance rehearsal. While she was practicing, he was in the church playing his music. His friend Darren had drums in the car, so he put his bass down and went outside to help Darren because he was helpful. That was something that he did. Then this other car pulled up with some more musicians in it. They were out there talking for a moment at his car on church ground, and somebody came shooting. Somebody said the person was on the foot. Somebody said he was in the car. I don't know. I just know that somebody came by shooting. My baby, after he was shot in the shoulders, he struggled back in the church for help, but they didn't know he was shot. They thought that he was panicking or something. He started shaking and they kind of stepped over him. That made me mad because my baby got shot and nobody even knew it. They were so busy running outside of the church and everybody was stepping over my baby. So we stumbled to church, the place where you're supposed to get help, and they finally realized he got shot. He told one guy that he think he got shot. And those were his last words. Me and my husband and my other 2 children were doing homework and preparing dinner. As soon as we got the call, we all ran out and went to the church on 116 in Halsted. And they were bringing Terrell out to the ambulance. He was still breathing then. My regret is that I got back into my car because that's what they told me to do instead of getting in the ambulance. I wish I would have gotten in the ambulance. I wasn't thinking. I was trying to get to the hospital as soon as possible. I never thought I was going to lose my son. He'd been hit by a car before, and he made it, and I thought that must be because of my prayers, so I never would have thought. And it was an eternity driving to the hospital. On the way there, I was calling friends and family, and I said, pray and meet us at Christ Hospital, pray. And I'm calling everybody and telling them to just pray for Terrell and meet us. And my husband kept saying while he was driving, breathe, Terrell, breathe. So when we got to the hospital, we were waiting, and I was wondering when they were going to let me back there with my baby. The doctor came out to talk to us, and I wasn't really comprehending what he was saying to us until my husband said, Are you talking in the past? Are you saying my son didn't make it? And that's when we found out. And I lost it from there. This devastated my entire family. The first year without Terrell was horrible for my entire family. When we got to the first year anniversary of his death, I tried to take my life. And I'm a Christian, a God-fearing woman, but I couldn't take the pain of him not being here anymore. I took a whole bottle of pills, and I went to sleep. And when I woke up the next morning, I didn't wake up, God woke me up. And I saw the sun and I was mad. I was like, come on, God, you left me here again? I believe that if all the kids got the love and attention they needed, we wouldn't be in this situation. Sure, you have parents out there who want to help their children but don't know how, but there are some parents not trying to raise their kids, not putting forth the effort, like the ones who don't have anything to do with the kids, and when they get to court, they say, Johnny, he was a real good child. They need to be held accountable. Parents must raise their children, make sure they get a decent education and do their homework. You need to be a parent and not your child's friend, hanging in and kicking it with them. It starts in the home. I used to think that as long as I raised my children right, as long as I kept them in order, then my boys would be safe, but I know now differently. If I don't take care of my neighbor's kids, if I don't take care of our youth, my own children aren't safe. So my goal is to work with the high-risk children and be proactive. Everything that our youth have to look forward to is violence. It's the games, the videos with shooting at the police, the songs. There's a whole lot of pieces to the puzzle. Gun legislation, it's a big one. There are so many guns in our community that I don't even know if they're dropping them out of cargo trains. Our youth can get guns for $25. Some can get them for free. I asked a group of young people, 8th grade and under, so if you need a gun, where can you get one? And one of the boys was like, I can go to my friend's house and get a gun. And I said, are you serious? And he was like, I can get one. They sell them out of their car trunks. People sell guns like it's candy. We shouldn't have to live in fear. We shouldn't have to be afraid to let our kids walk to the store. We don't have to live this way. When we get the people in our community to realize this, then we'll be okay. We don't need any more mothers in my situation. We need to speak out. If we don't speak out, the Black community is going to end up being in the museum. We're going to end up there, and people are going to say, this is where the Black people used to live. This is how they used to look. At the rate that we're going now, we're going to have more Black men incarcerated or murdered, and the generation is going to become extinct. So we have to speak out.
Thank you so much, Kona. I'd now like to introduce Rangan Altai, who was most recently in Gypsy, which closed last month at Chicago Shakespeare Theater. Her many prior credits include productions at Goodman, Steppenwolf, Northlight, About Face, Victory Gardens, Wisdom Bridge, and Court. She will be reading Joy McCormick's story.
I was 15 when I found out that I was pregnant with Frankie. I was a freshman at Lincoln Park High School in their International Baccalaureate program. I was having some irregular periods, and my best friend was saying to me, Joy, I think you're pregnant. And I was like, no, I don't think I'm pregnant. There was really a part of me that kind of knew that I was, but I didn't want to deal with it because I knew that my mom would be really upset. Although she was a great friend, my mother was never a great mom. Being a parent was always secondary to the other parts of her life. So when I told her the news, her reaction was like, I'm 32, I can't be a grandmother. She really wanted me to have an abortion. She tried convincing me, she tried bribing me. But I decided I was gonna have that baby. I used to read Goodnight Moon to Frankie at night when I was pregnant. Goodnight Moon, Goodnight Stars. And at the time, there was this theory about how classical music would develop the child's brain. So I would put on the classical music station. Sometimes I would even put the headphones on my belly and hope that he was getting it, you know. I had complications in the pregnancy, and there were a couple of times when it wasn't clear that everything was going to be okay. He was 3.5 weeks late, and I was very sick with toxemia, and by the time he was born. And I was in labor for 2.5 days. It was such an emotional experience because I'd been going through it for so long, and the whole pregnancy had all this turmoil, and then it all just kind of went away because there's this beautiful thing that I was holding. He was 8 pounds, 12 ounces when he was born at Illinois Masonic. He was a big boy. And he was had very dark hair and had very red skin, and some of his hair was standing up, and he was very angry. He just came into the world very angry. I was 19 at the time my second son, Victor, was born. As an only child myself, I wanted Frankie to have a sibling. I didn't want him to be alone in the world. But by then, my relationship with my husband, Chico, was not healthy. He's a great person with a great heart, and we're still great friends, but he never learned how to be a husband. So I chose to leave when Victor was a baby. My husband had closed the door on our commitment by the choices he was making, and once he did that, I felt like, okay, I owe nothing to this relationship anymore. I gave it my best, and it didn't work out. And so very quickly after I left, I allowed myself to be true to me and began dating women. I think I had known that I was gay for a very long time, but I rebelled against it. I didn't want it to be true because of the stigma that went with it. And there were not a lot of examples around me of gay parents, so it was challenging to see myself both as a parent and as a gay woman. But when Victor was about 3 years old, I met my life partner, Sue. And 6 months after we started dating, I had a conversation with the boys about whether or not they thought it would be okay if Sue joined our family. And they both said yes. By then, I had graduated college and was building a career. It was a very open, very honest, very down-to-earth, very caring home environment. We ate dinners together most nights of the week. We always had a family day, which was our day not to do work and our day to play together and go do things and hang out. We made a big deal about all that special stuff in life, the holidays and special occasions and milestones. We just had an incredible energy. People were like, wow, this is amazing. And it was amazing. I mean, it's destroyed now, but it was really amazing while it lasted. Frankie was a fireball when he was little. And I had to be very intentional about parenting him with behavior modification and all kinds of things to give him channels for that energy. And he really loved learning. And he loved information, and he loved facts. He was just so analytical and inquisitive and ready to challenge things at such a young age. And people were really attracted to his energy. People wanted to be around him. He was a leader at school. He just had that confidence. And when he was around 17 or 18, he really started to question life. And he started coming up with these crazy things like, Mom, what if I decided to be homeless for a year? And I'm trying not to react to that, right? Well, why would you want to have that experience, Frankie? And he's like, I want to know what it's like to live a life where you're not connected to material things. What would that be like? You know, he just started questioning himself. What did he want to be? What did he want to do? What was important? That was a big question for him. What kind of man do I want to be? Barack Obama. That was the first place he started to find the answer. Back when Obama was still just a state senator, Frankie fell in love with him, literally. It was a little bit of an obsession over this guy. He felt like he could relate to him because Obama had this really unique background, and he used that background to his advantage. Frankie was very inspired by the idea that a man of color could challenge the status quo in the way that Obama was willing to do. By the time he was a senior at DePaul, Frankie's plan was, I'm going to take a year off and do service abroad, volunteering in a Latin American country. Then I'm going to go to law school so that I can eventually have a political career. I'd like to start out as an alderman. Then I could be mayor. And then... This kid was such a planner. Such a planner. He believed he was going to change the world. And I know you hear that. Like, you hear people say that, but I'm telling you, Frankie believed that he could change the world. Halloween in our family, you know, we just did it up. Every year, my partner and I would have all the little cousins come over, and we'd have a party, and they would color pumpkins and bob apples. And our house was one of the most decorated on the block. So that night, Frankie came over and he went trick-or-treating with his little cousins, put on a mask, and he was being very silly. But I remember him being tired, and he seemed kind of down. And we stood in our kitchen, and I looked in his face, and he said, you know, Mom, I don't know if I'm gonna go out tonight. And I held his face in my hands, and I said, Frankie, you're 21. This is the time to go out and have fun. And he said, yeah. I'm gonna go to school and see what everybody's doing. I don't know if I'm gonna go out or not. I thought that he had just overextended himself because he always overextended himself. A couple of weeks earlier, we'd gotten word that Frankie had won the Lincoln Laureate Award. He had also been nominated to do an internship at the White House, and he had been the featured speaker at the annual diversity brunch at DePaul, hosted by the university's president. He was very excited about that because he liked seeing himself as a public speaker. It's what he saw himself doing in the future. So when people would ask me, how's Frankie? I would say, he's on fire. Nothing is gonna stop him now. I really believed it. Now that night, for the first time in 10 years, my partner Sue and I decided to go out for Halloween. A bunch of us, my ex-husband and my brother-in-law, my best friend and her niece. We went to a Halloween party at a bar in Wicker Park, right there at North Avenue in Damon. My costume was like a witch type, black cape thing, it was very long and a little sexy, and I felt pretty good. Dancing was always something I loved to do, so I danced. I was on top of the world. While we were there, Frankie and his dad started texting each other, and he tells us that he's gonna go into this party and that he would let us know when he was leaving so we could all meet up. We thought he was going to a party in Wrigleyville with a friend from high school. We had no idea that hadn't happened. I just assumed we'd see him later that night at another party or at a bar in Lincoln Square. But once we got to that other party, Sue started not feeling well, so she and I decided to leave. And when we came home, Victor was sleeping on the couch in the living room. I was still wearing my Halloween costume, and then Sue gets a phone call. She says, "Joy, go change out of those clothes right now. We gotta go, right now, we gotta go." And I was like, "What's going on?" And then she said, "Just do it, just do it, just do it." So I ran upstairs, I changed my clothes, and Sue doesn't tell me what's happened. So we're in the car, and she's driving like crazy, and I'm like, "Sue, what's going on? I'm freaking out." And she said, "Frankie's been shot." The next thing I know, I'm in this room, this big room upstairs at Illinois Masonic Hospital, and there's a bunch of people already there. So then, this, I don't know who came, a lady, a nurse, something, and I was like, "Where is he?" And I started trying to slam through the door to get to him, and a bunch of people started holding me back. They said, "No, they're working on him, you can't see him." I'm like, "No, I have to see him, I have to be there with him." They would never let me go back to see him till he was already gone. The scene at the hospital was a nightmare. I was out of control. I was begging people to kill me. I tried killing myself several times. I kept on trying to find objects to cut my wrists. I tried to take shoelaces off of people. Finally, I got a keychain and I got into the bathroom and I locked myself in and I twisted it around my neck as hard as I could until there wasn't any more give. And the keychain broke and a security guard and the police busted the door open. Eventually, Victor got there and we went back to see Frankie. I was numb by then. I was beyond any feeling. I tried to give Frankie a hug and it was just... They tried to clean him up, but there was blood coming through the sheets and then I walked right out of the hospital and walked down Wellington towards the lake, and I was planning on jumping in and letting myself drown. They found me before I got to the lake and they got me to come back. And we came home. I went to Frankie's room and lay in his bed. But things just got very bad after that. Worse than you could imagine your worst nightmare being. I didn't eat for 11 days. I couldn't connect to Victor. I couldn't connect to Sue. As far as I was concerned, I pretty much died. All I could think about was the fact that I felt Frankie suffering. I physically felt Frankie suffering. I felt like I could hear him in my head, in my heart. And I felt like he needed me. I really felt like Frankie was struggling with dying. Like he was kind of lost between two worlds, two universes. I kept saying, "Look, I know people think I'm being selfish, but Frankie's alone and Victor's not. And this is the toughest decision I've had to make, but Victor has two parents here, and Frankie doesn't have any, and I'm gonna go with Frankie." How do you learn to live again? I don't know how to express it, but after this happened, I couldn't do the simplest of things. I struggled going up and down stairs. I couldn't walk down the street by myself. I couldn't take a bus or a train. I couldn't go into a store without having a panic attack, breaking down, crying. It took a lot of really hard work to get to the place that I'm at right now. And I continue to find ways to challenge myself to do things that are difficult. Like I recently went to the zoo with my family, and I saw all these children playing there. And being in places that have so many fond memories for me is still really hard. But working with other survivors on a daily basis reminds me that even though I'm in pain, there are other people who are in just as much pain. What Chicago's Citizens for Change allows me to do is keep this tragedy and my experience in it in perspective. I don't know that I would say it's been healing to get the organization up and running, but I would definitely say that it gives me a source of motivation and strength. And I think Frankie would be proud that I've become more emotionally vulnerable so that I can love a bit more openly those I'm closest with, especially Victor and Sue. I mean, definitely, there's still a lot of numbness. I don't dance anymore, and I don't celebrate any holidays. If something feels too celebratory, I just can't do it. But I have had moments when I surprise myself. Not long ago, Victor, Sue, and I went to the ocean. And she and I were standing in the water, and a wave came up from behind us and splashed us, and apparently, I smiled and I laughed. And Victor took a picture of it, and he said, "Mom, Sue, I want to show you something." So he shows us this picture, both of us holding onto each other, laughing and smiling and standing in the ocean. And I was surprised because I didn't know I had the capacity to do that anymore. I just thought I would never, ever smile again.
Thank you so much, Reagan. Well, we're really honored to have with us today Frankie, who you just heard about. His brother, Victor Valencia, is here. So, Victor, would you join us?
So, this is not easy. The 2 weeks before my brother was murdered, he was the keynote speaker at the Presidential Diversity Brunch at DePaul University, and he gave this, what was supposed to be a 15-minute speech, but took 45 minutes. He gave this speech, and kind of went on and on and on. And fortunately, my father recorded it, and during the speech, he kind of gave a message to young people, challenging them. And that's something that Frankie always tried to do. He always tried to challenge young people. What he was very fond of doing was sending a simple question text message, "What's your greatest achievement in life?" Or "Where do you see yourself in 10 years?" And he legitimately expected this full-blown response over a text message. And if you didn't respond, he'd send you a text like, "Hey, did you get my message?" It was just she was really nonchalant about it. And Frankie very often tried to challenge people around him. He tried to challenge my cousins. He tried to challenge youth that he worked with. He tried to challenge me. And I'm very fortunate to have had those experiences with him, and very fortunate to have the memories that I have with him. So 2 weeks before he was murdered, he gave this speech, and what I want to share with you guys is the end of his speech. I feel like it's very powerful. I feel like it has a strong message behind it, something that a lot of young people need to think about. So these are his words. My last message. For the young folks out there, I challenge you to take a risk. Take a risk in dreaming about a better world. Take a risk in dreaming about everything that's possible for your life. Dream about how to improve it. Dream about bettering the lives of people around you. Dream about the need to build a better world. Dream about all the opportunities to do just that. Sometimes we may not see them, but they're there. Maybe we need to ask questions. Maybe we need to get pushed, but they're there. Take a risk and dream about leading. Leading your families, your friends, your networks, your communities. Lead them to do good, to be loving and caring people. Lead by example. Don't let doubts, fears, pressures, concerns, don't let that hold you back. Dream, lead, and take action. We need you.
Okay, so that amazing speech that Victor just read is how we close Big Shoulders Books. Big Shoulders Books, How Long Will I Cry, the book. And so this book has been a really amazing experience for my students and me. We went through 7,500 copies in a few weeks, and we're now halfway through our second printing, so more than 10,000 copies of this book have gone out literally all over the country, 43 plus states and counting. Two things you need to know about the book. One, it's free. It's free to anyone who can use it for their own anti-violence efforts. All you have to do, and then the second thing is all you have to do is go to bigshouldersbooks.com, all one word, to order it. Okay, so I'd like to thank our actors for those incredible readings, and I'd like to welcome two people to the stage. Pamela and Joy have agreed to come up and talk to you today. So you just heard their stories. So Joy McCormick and Pamela Montgomery-Bosley, please join us. Thanks. And Victor, if you'd stay on the stage, that would be great. And I'm wondering if any of you wanted to ask some questions of Pamela, Joy, or Victor, or have any comments for them.
Yeah, I have a question. My name is Shiva Singh Khalsa. What do you think will make a difference? Really?
You guys want to go up on that?
Because we're all like in pain about this.
You know what? It's not one solution, but it's so many solutions to this this madness. Just like at the end, we're gonna write letters to, well, not letters, but yeah, letters to our representatives, because we want common sense gun laws in this city. And I'm on the south side of Chicago. It's more guns on the streets, illegal. They not legal guns on the streets than people. So we have to come up with ways to bring about common sense gun laws. We have to fight for funding for these after-school programs, because we have, with St. Sabina, funding is always being cut to programs that's being ran in the community, after-school programs, mentoring programs. So we have to fight for funding in the community, and we have to do parenting classes. It's important for parents to understand how to raise their children, and it's so many things that need to be done. It's not one solution, and then everybody can take on one child at a time. It's not, if you see, children hanging out in the community, in the neighborhoods, just talk to them. And what I did with my children is I showed them love and attention. And that's what they're missing in the community. They're not getting that love and that attention. So if we can just touch one child at a time, you can change some things. So it's not one solution, but we all can come together and do this. And we need to unify and send letters to our representatives, but it starts not just with our representatives, but it starts in the community. Just like we have, for instance, the blue lights, everybody say that that's there to catch crime. When I grew up, the blue lights was my neighbors. They watched us, they reported things to the police department. They was the blue lights. So we have to go back to the way it used to be and make our communities back safe like they was. We need to tell when we see a crime. We the voice, like I'm a voice for Terrell, but we the voice in our community. So if you witness something, say something, because Terrell's case is unsolved. It's 8 years now, and there's no reason that his case is unsolved, but people are not speaking out. So you can't be fearful. When you see a crime, you have to say something in order for it to stop.
Yeah, I would just, I absolutely agree with what Pam said, and I think the thing that we really have to keep in mind is that, first of all, parents who have lost children and young and loved ones to violence are often stigmatized. There's a certain amount of stigma that goes with that experience that allows people who haven't lost not to feel it, not to deal with it, and not to accept the fact that this is happening in their community, in their environments, and that they're affected. So the first thing I want to say is thank you. Thank you for your concern and for your being here and for your care, because really, we've already lost. Our lives will never be the same, no matter what changes come forward. It really is about you. And the next thing I would like to say is that I think that people do need to be able to relate to this experience, because I tell you, I've recently had someone, I was sharing my experience with someone from California, a school teacher from California, and her first question to me was, well, did Frankie go down the wrong path? Was he hanging around with the wrong people? That was her initial reaction. And I didn't, because I'm not rude, but I really wanted to ask, did you ask that of the families of Newtown? Why is it, as the city of Chicago, are we accepting this happening? Why do we accept that on Mondays we're going to see these statistics? Why are we accepting this at normal? I will tell you that other reporters from other countries who come here, they come all the way from Japan and from Europe to talk to parents like myself and Pam Bosley. Why? Because they think it's crazy. Because they can't imagine the fact that for them, they have 3 and 4 murders for their entire country in a year, and we're looking at our statistics for a weekend in Chicago. We have to keep fighting. We have to continue to be vocal. And I would say about gun legislation, we have to remember that it's not just illegal guns that are on the streets. It's guns that are purchased legally that end up being used illegally in crimes. Right? And how are we going to change that? We had Newtown in our country reacted, but there hasn't been any federal changes to our laws. We still don't have universal background checks at the federal level. So when are we going to stop hiring people and putting them in positions when they don't represent our voice?
Just to give my perspective, so I'm a surviving sibling, and I've, since this experience, every job that I've had has been specifically working with youth, because what I feel is very important is to make sure that the young people of our society, the young people of our communities, have someone to look up to, have that role model, have somebody who they can see and say, that's the path that I need to take, those are the steps that are appropriate to take, and making sure that we're making connections with young folks in our society so that they don't feel like they have no one to turn to. They don't feel like they are isolated and they are alone, because they're not. So for me, that's how I would answer the question.
Yes, sir.
What was your experience? Obviously, all 3 of you have been active, in trying to do something about gun violence in this city. But as far as the expanded family, the friends of the victims that were shot, your sons, and and their school and so on. I mean, how did people react in either a helpful way, to do something about it, or just ignored it like, well, that's the way things are?
So from my perspective, again, I was 17. I was a senior in high school at the time that this incident occurred, and it was not something that I went to Lincoln Park High School, and it was not something that the population that I was surrounded by was used to experiencing. And people didn't really know how to deal with me now that I changed. My personality changed. The person that I was no longer. And so it was very difficult for people to connect to me in the same ways, and a lot of people pulled back because of that. I was very active in high school, very involved, and I really pulled that back. Friends that were connected to my older brother, Frankie, they reached out to me, and they tried to be supportive, and I really appreciated that. And I'm sure that my mom will speak more closely on DePaul University and the relationship that we developed with them, but it really wasn't easy for people to adjust to this. When you are a certain way, when you present yourself in a certain manner, and something traumatic happens to you, you really do change who you are. It really does impact you. And it's hard for you to present yourself in the same light, you know? I started wearing black every day, and it wasn't easy for me to be as involved or to hang out with friends or to find things as funny. I had this dark cloud looming over me for a while, and because of that, people were really turned off by that. It's easy for individuals to say, just give them a couple of weeks, give them a couple of days even. But when it takes 3 months, when it takes a year, and the person that they're used to seeing hasn't returned, hasn't come back, it's very difficult for them to find ways to reconnect.
So what I'd like to answer is to talk about community at large, because to me that's a contributing factor to why this is happening. So in many communities where things like this happen more often than others, I don't use safe anymore, because I live in what's supposed to be a safe neighborhood, and Frankie lived in Lincoln Park, which is supposed to be a safe neighborhood, and that didn't matter. But in areas where this happens more often than others, people have gotten used to it so much that they're not speaking about what's happening. And it's one of the things that Ms. Bosley spoke upon, because so many crimes go unsolved. We have over 70% of our homicides go unsolved in the city of Chicago right now. And so it's not that 70% of the time there aren't any witnesses. It's that we don't have enough people who care enough and will stand up to their fear to tell what they've seen and break the code of silence on our streets. And so that's happening over and over and over again. But community has to feel empowered that they're not doing it alone. And so I have actually seen this happen. We've had a case where we went out because there was a 13-year-old who was shot playing at a park. And when we first went out and started giving out flyers asking people to come forward with anonymous information or any information that would lead to the conviction of this particular crime, the first weekend we came out, we had cars passing us, sometimes crumbling the flyers back at us, sometimes trying to hurt us physically with their cars. But the next weekend we came back again, and this time we had more people stop and take the flyers. The third time we came out, we had people actually pull over their cars and say, "How can we help?" And that's the kind of action that we need.
I agree with everything that's being said too. And as far as the community, and my community, they're desensitized to it. It's so many killings in the community. As far as my family, when this happened to me, I was the first. So nobody knew how to talk to me, they didn't know what to say to me. Because I was the first, and people look at me as 8 years, they feel as though you haven't gotten any better, you don't get better. What you do is, as far as parents like us, we connect with each other, with our different groups, because we all lost our children to violence. But our community has become desensitized to it, because it's on the news every day. Every day you turn on the news. This past weekend, we had 30 shootings and 4 dead. People continue to eat. And it doesn't affect them. You sit at the table, you eating while they saying that, but that's 4 mothers, and they cry, 4 mothers and fathers, they crying, they lost their child. But we are so, as a society, has become desensitized to it, because the news come on, you watch the first clipping of it, that's what it is, but nobody do anything about it. You don't see nobody getting upset, angry. But when it happened in Newtown, they came together, and they went out into the streets, and they came together, they unified. And they fought for common sense gun laws, even though some of the things didn't happen, but they did come together. In the city of Chicago, we just continued like, oh, that's how it's supposed to be. You know, when the news come on, when it first come on, we know we're gonna hear 4 people died or 2 people. We know when we turn the news, everybody turn the news know what you're gonna hear when it first come on before you get to the weather and the sports, because we have become desensitized to them. We have to change that as a community. We cannot continue to turn our news on every single day and hear that type of news and just accept it.
Questions? Right. Anything you guys would like to add?
I just want to say, like I said, I'm Terrell's voice. I wish I was here saying that I'm here standing because my son is here and he graduated from college. He's doing all the right, you know, everything is going well. But unfortunately, I'm in this unfortunate situation because I don't have my son, so my life has changed. So what I do, just to give you a little bit, I know they mentioned that I'm Purpose Over Pain. I'm co-founder of Purpose Over Pain. We're an organization. What we do is we go out into the community, we fight for common sense gun laws, we talk to parents that end up in this unfortunate situation, we do the initial contact, because that's something, when it happened to me, I didn't have that. And we do safe Saturday nights for basketball for our young men and young ladies. We try to offer them mentoring to try to give them guidance. So, and actually that's one group I'm with. I stay very busy because I feel as though if I stop, I would lose my mind, and that's what that in the book it said. So I'm actually, me and my husband, we started Terrell Anti-Violence Association. You know, we started something with Terrell group. We do safe prayer vigils in the community of Chesterfield. So we work along with our church and we do that. And I'm part of a parent group, you know, that's called Parent Murdered Children. I'm part of so many organizations because I have to stay busy, and I'm with. What I did was, I worked in banking for over 20 years, but after Terrell's death, I connected with Father Flager, with Saint Sabina, and I work with high-risk kids because I have to change this. This is what I do every single day. I you know, work with children throughout the day because my goal is, I have 2 more sons, and I cannot afford to be in this unfortunate situation. So I just need you all to, you know, just get involved. And don't just let, you know, this story, that what we're talking about, this is real lives that's in that story. So I'm just asking that you all get involved and help us change this and speak on behalf of our children.
All right, well, I'd like to thank these 3 courageous, amazing people for being with us today. Thank you so much. I'd like to thank the wonderful actors we had, and I'd like to thank you, EILEEN, and Organizing for Action. We're really grateful to you all for coming out. So I always say with the book, it's free, but you have to pay for it. So we always ask that you do something. So the idea of this free book is that you go out and, for instance, those of you with money, if you can donate money to an anti-violence group in Chicago, you can find a long list of them in the back of our book. 2 good ideas would be Chicago Citizens for Change, Joy's group, and Purpose Over Pain, Pamela's group. Otherwise, just to take action, to give your heart to these issues. I'd like to thank you all for being here today. EILEEN, is there anything you'd like to add?
I'd just like to remind you all that we did ask you to write on those index cards some thought to be a little action today to take for a message to our legislators. One first step, hopefully, on your journey, well, probably not the first, probably all of you are working on this already, but another small step on our journey to trying to improve the situation for our city, for our state, and for our country. And thank you all so much for being here. Thank you to Miles Harvey, to the wonderful actors, to the brave family members for helping us put this together. And thank you to CAN-TV for covering it. Thank you all.
And don't forget your books, which are available in the lobby on your way out. Thanks so much.